What's going on, everyone? This is Jonathan Salmon, and I'm back with another breakdown. Just breaking down UFC 242, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. Pretty, for the entire card as a review, wasn't too bad. There was a few competitive fights that I saw in the early prelims and prelims. Missed the Diego Ferreira versus Tyson fight. But other than that, I pretty much caught the entire card. And other than the main event, everything else was fairly good. Co-main event and main event were pretty entertaining. The main event wasn't as competitive as I was hoping for. I really thought or hoped that Poirier would put up even greater fight against Khabib, but that's not even his fault. Nurmagomedov just really came out and just wanted it and dominated like he always does. So, just a review of the main event. Khabib pretty much did exactly what I thought he would do. He kind of moved on the outside and picked his shots, really feinted with the strikes until he was able to get in on a single leg, I believe. I think it was a single leg, and a trip against the fence was the very first takedown that he got against Poirier, which is pretty much the same exact takedown that he got against Al Iaquinta, his first takedown against him. So, he's able to control Poirier's ankle and really, just force him up against the cage and trip out his leg, to get the takedown. So, from there, it was just takedown city. And Poirier really couldn't find himself in the fight. He landed a few good low calf kicks in the first round. Started to get away from it, in the later rounds. He did throw some of the front kicks and try to utilize his jab and everything, but eventually he started loading up a lot on his strikes. Didn't really go to the body of Khabib at all, which, just watching all these other fights on the card with wrestling-based fighters, the fact that people are not going to the body with their punches, it's almost frustrating to watch. There is a danger going to the body. Don't get me wrong. There's a danger going to the body if you strike, and it can potentially leave your head open for either a knee or uppercut or something like that. But I really do think that if people really want to get, stifle a wrestling game, it's really attacking the body and attacking the legs, really low leg kicks to the calf, really going to benefit. So, Poirier did a bit of that in the first round, but then got away from it after he got taken down. And that is when Khabib does all his work. He gets you down on the ground. He sucks away your confidence. And then, just ground and pound and positional dominance from there. So, once he did that, he was able to land. Khabib didn't land that many strikes, but he on the feet anyway. But he was able to start dipping low, going for uppercuts, dipping low, going for overhands as he does. And from there, you just continue to see Dustin freeze, and the takedowns became more and more prevalent. Khabib really was able to utilize the clinch and the body locks when he was up top, against the cage, and really control Dustin's upper body up against the cage. So, and then allowed him to actually trip out the legs a whole lot more. So he has a lot of upper body control, really gets either a good underhook or a good body lock, and is able to either control a far side wrist, and trip out the legs. It's like he's causing Poirier to either defend up top from getting dragged down to the ground from the clinch, or defend the trips that his upper body's being controlled. He really can't even defend the trips as well. So that's what we really saw in the fight, that Khabib's takedown game is so versatile. It's just, he can go for double legs, he can go for single legs, he goes for trips, he goes for body locks, controls your body, then go for trips. There's so many different options that he has, that he utilizes against opponents against the cage. So really, it's about staying off of the fence against Khabib. And once Dustin wasn't able to do that, and once he wasn't able to mount any offense, very low volume. It kind of gave an open window for Khabib to just do his game, eventually sink in a rear naked choke, and that was that. But, obviously what I think is next for Khabib is either Tony Ferguson, which he mentioned before the fight, which would be a pretty crazy fight just because Ferguson is more of a guy that he'll go with the flow. He likes to create chaos, whether it's in the striking or the grappling, and his cardio is crazy, so he's always going to be there to fight. So that's going to obviously be an interesting fight just because of that scramble ability from Ferguson, and as well as his cardio. But also, George St. Pierre has been on Khabib's mind as well as a potential fight, like a legacy fight. And I think, after those two fights, he's probably going to call it a career if he's able to beat those two guys. There's pretty much nothing else for him to do at that point. He pretty much beat everyone that has a big name currently in the sport within the 155-pound division. So he probably would call it a day, I think. I don't even think he would rematch McGregor at this point. I'm not even sure if he cares too much about the money aspect. I think he just is like, you know what? I beat him. I took his soul. I took his soul already. So, and his pride. So what do I even need to have a rematch with him for? It's like, who cares? I'm just going to move on. So pretty much, I think those are the last two fights, and then we'll see if he decides to stick around from there. But as for the rest of the card, the co-main event, we had Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder in a pretty controversial fight. Controversial in the way that, when you hear the scorecards, it was 30-27, 29-28, 30-27. I think it was 30-27 for Edson Barboza, and then 29-28 for Paul Felder, and 30-27 for Paul Felder. He ended up getting a win, split decision. I think this fight easily could have been a draw, just based on the fact that, both men really did a great job. I'd say Edson edged out the first two rounds, but then Paul Felder ended so well in the third round that if a draw, I don't think it was enough for a 10-8 round, but, he put in so much work in that third round and really hurt Edson. They hurt each other throughout the fight, but he really hurt Edson and put the pressure on in the third round. So, if I saw a draw come out of that, I wouldn't have been super disappointed with that. But a 30-27 all three rounds for Paul Felder is just it wasn't right. Edson Barboza, his left kick, his left body kick was so fast. It's still not deteriorating in speed over all these years. He's just, as soon as he lifts up his left leg, it goes to your body, goes to your legs, goes to your head, like, boom, quick. It's like you can't even defend against it. Paul Felder was getting caught right in the liver and the ribs all night with that left switch kick. Even if it's like a switch kick, usually you're able to see it coming, but he's so fast, Barboza, with it. He just lifts it up and it's just there. You're already getting hit with it. So he was just landing that all night, and pretty decent jab there. Both guys were throwing big haymakers in the fight as well. I think both guys could have utilized a more disciplined jab during the fight. It probably would have set up a bit more offense. I believe Felder did utilize his jab a little bit better and was able to land boxing combinations better because of that. But, there's a little bit of wild chaos in there from time to time, which, don't get me wrong. Hey, we love that. We love a little bit of chaos in our fights. That's where some of those crazy knockouts come out, during all that chaos. But, yeah, I think it was a really competitive fight. Very, very even fight. Barboza actually surprised me with going for a takedown. Believes the second round caught Felder off guard, but then Felder did some good work in the guard with his elbows and cut up Barboza pretty well. So did a lot of damage from off his back. Barboza even had the opportunity to, they separate him when they're on the ground. He had an opportunity to go back into top position on the ground, but he's like, nah, I don't really like all those elbows to my face. Let's stand this up again. But all in all, kind of controversial. You could have easily gave it to Barboza. I felt like he did win the first two rounds, but I would have been more satisfied with a draw over a win for Paul Felder, I think. Nothing against him, but I feel like even though he won that third round, it doesn't really erase all the other work that Barbosa did in the first 2 rounds. So kind of a controversial decision on this one. But what are you going to do? That's the game. And we have a couple other fights, a couple other highlights I'd like to point out. Just Curtis Blades. He dominated in his heavyweight fight. His wrestling is really a problem for anyone, but I really do think there's some holes in his striking game that needs to be shored up. And sometimes he does shoot from far out, which I think you would have a problem against Stipe Miocic, like any of the other guys, and in the top 3 guys. Francis, who beat him twice already, and Cormier, whose wrestling is pretty nasty himself. So I think he would have a tough time with those guys because they have a little bit better understanding of that distance between wrestling and striking. They would probably catch him in the transition. But if he can really, work on a jab and get his jab going a little bit more, body strikes, I'm telling you, it's just, I don't know. When someone learns that body striking is the future of setting up all offense in MMA, they're really going to change their entire game. But, some body striking, 2 takedowns, some body striking, and then coming back up top and then going to a takedown will really aid Curtis Blades' game a lot. He's really fast and he has a great cardio, it seems. He just can keep going. I think he has the most takedowns, they said, in UFC heavyweight history. So that alone lets you know that he's a cardio machine because wrestling is so taxing. So, yeah, he was pretty impressive in his win. We also had Islam Makhachev versus Davi Ramos. Almost butchered his name. So that in that fight, what I noticed, Makhachev got the win in that one against Ramos, but for the first couple of rounds, it was kind of very. Well, actually, in the first round, it's pretty much no offense. Very low volume from both guys. Islam Makhachev was just trying to set up his left hand, and Davi Ramos was just kind of waiting too long. He was trying to counter. He was trying to catch Makhachev coming in, but he was just waiting way too long and not really throwing anything in between. So it ended up being kind of a pretty uneventful first round. Second round, what I saw and I think is just a glaring weakness in Makhachev's game on the feet is he likes to explode forward. He has a pretty good striking style. He has good striking ability, but there are times he likes to explode forward into his left hand without a setup, and he can get caught in the counter afterwards. Even every time he threw his left hand, he would drop his right hand because it was such a kind of explosive left hand he would come forward with. So when he does that, he drops his right hand and he leaves himself open to a check hook, a check left hook if the opponent's orthodox, or maybe even a overhand left if the opponent would be southpaw. He really leaves himself open. He explodes forward too much in that long range distance and really exposes his chin, in the transition there. He actually, I think the only loss that he had was against Adriano Martin, and that's exactly the punch that he got hit with. He got hit with a check left hook. And in the second round, Ramos actually landed a check left hook and put him on his butt for a second. Makhachev recovered, but him getting caught again, those 2 fights have been so many years. There's been so many years that have passed in between those 2 fights. To still be getting caught with that same exact counter check hook, it's obviously an opening. It's obviously a weakness in his game on the feet that he's gonna have to shore up. But in the third round, he landed a nice knee in the clinch. Makhachev did against Ramos and hurt Ramos pretty good. Brought everything to the ground, and from there, just dominated top position and landed ground and pound, went for submissions, and Well, Ramos was really active off his back as well. He really was going for arm bars and everything too. But Makhachev just really has a good base on top and was able to keep his hips really square, keep his posture up when Ramos went for arm bars and other submissions like triangles and anything like that he's trying to set up. So, Makhachev is really good. I think he's a great grappler, and I think his striking is good. But that, if there was one thing for him to work on, is definitely that transition from the straight left hand, and really shoring up, like maybe even throwing a jab or throwing a straight left hand and then a hook right behind it, or a straight left and then a straight right. Maybe like a kind of like a blitz. He needs to do something to kind of shore up that little defensive gap when he throws his straight left hand, because getting caught with a check left hook again so many years after that was his the punch that knocked him out in his only loss. That's really kind of a glaring hole in the game that he has to close up. A couple other fights. Tokhav versus Murphy, that ended in a draw. Murphy was a newcomer, UK fighter, and Tokhav is a Russian fighter, kind of in that whole Khabib camp. And it ended in a draw. I'm not even angry with that, just based on the fact that, Murphy gets some good experience, honestly, and he looked pretty decent on the feet. It's just really some wrestling tweaks he has to make to his game to really be competitive in the featherweight division. And Tokhav, he had a long layoff, and this one, even though he got a draw, which is always disappointing, is better than a loss, I suppose. I mean, I think he did control a lot of the wrestling, but there were times he was resting on top and not really setting up a lot of offense. So I think that's what the judges looked at, why they decided to rule it a draw. Give it a 28-28, one judge gave it. Which, I'm not even really angry at all. I feel like both guys get to walk away with some experience and a lesson learned, and can come back a little sharper with that. Also, JoJo Calderwood beating, forgot this lady's name. She fought Andrea Lee. Yeah. So Joanne Calderwood defeating Andrea Lee. That was pretty impressive, because especially since Calderwood was the underdog in that fight, both ladies were just throwing a lot of offense through the entire match. Jabs, elbows, front kicks, round kicks, leg kicks. The wrestling is really what separated everything. I believe Andrea Lee, I think they got the same amount of takedowns potentially in that fight, but the wrestling is what really made it competitive ultimately, and both women had time to shine in that category. There was a real back and forth kind of flavor to the striking in this one, but eventually once they started wrestling transitions, that's when you started to see a little bit more of a hesitation on the other person's strikes, which both women are strikers, so obviously the wrestling would be the thing that kind of just breaks the usual grind of striking and returning. So once they really discovered that, I think Andrea Lee went for the first takedown, and once she got that, it really started to change everything, changed the game. But despite that, Calderwood just had so much volume in the third round that you just couldn't ignore it. She really just picked up the pace. She kept her cardio really high and just pieced Andrea Lee up in the third round. He was even able to get a takedown back. She got taken down and then was able to get her own takedown before the end of the round. So really good fight for Calderwood. She's moving up the ranks. I mean, I think she was actually already above Lee in the ranks in flyweight. But yeah, she showed that she's very, very competitive, like that high volume. I think coming up from strawweight and not having to cut as much weight, it's really aided her in her volume. She's able to keep the volume way higher than she did when she was at the lower weight class. So I think that's what really helped her in that fight. And last but not least, Muslim Salikov versus Nordine Taleb. I mean, that knockout was so. It was really, really brilliant how Salikov set that up. During the fight, Nordine Taleb was really switching a lot. He was going from orthodox to southpaw, back and forth. But the way he kind of did it, he started to telegraph it. When he began the fight, he had a great left switch kick that he would throw from orthodox, or when he went to southpaw, he just throw the left high kick right up, and that was keeping Salikov, honest. It was preventing him from really using his right hand, like Dominic Cruz pointed that out. And when he was using that left kick, he's really shutting down Salikov's offense from the right side. But what I did notice eventually that when Nordine Taleb actually started landing his right kicks, that's when Salikov started returning kicks, returning fire immediately. He would get hit with a low kick and then he would immediately low kick back, which is a good like kickboxing 101. You really want to you don't want to start letting your opponent dominate in that realm and not return something back. So that's what started to happen in the fight. They started to give and return over and over again. And I think from there, that return, it started to shut down Taleb's left kick. Like he got away from it a bit, But the real issue that he had was that even though I love the idea of stance switching in MMA and in any striking sports, if you're able to fight from two stances, it just helps so much. It gives you an added advantage in my opinion. But at the same time, Taleb started telegraphing it. He started like switching southpaw every time he exited over to his left, and then switching back to orthodox when he was exiting back towards his right, or circling to his right. If he went from orthodox, which is the standard position, if he went from righty position to lefty southpaw position, he would exit to his left or circle to his left, and eventually Salikov started to pick up on that pattern, and he really wanted to really time his overhand right. He's a Sanda fighter, and they're very much a lot of spinning kicks, a lot of flashy movements and everything like that. But Salikov really has nailed down the flash with the conventional kind of striking. He's found a nice mix of the two styles. Being a little bit more conservative. He did land a spinning back kick in this one too. But ultimately what paid off is him reading how Taleb was moving, switching stances. And when you switch stances, that there's this little in-between space when you're switching stances that you become a little square to your opponent, potentially, depending on how you switch. You can become square to your opponent, and then that kind of opens up all the offense down the middle. So what Salikov did was just wait for Taleb to exit and circle to his left once again and go to southpaw. As soon as he did that, he threw the overhand right and clipped him. He knocked him out. Like, he was out before he even hit the ground. And, it was just a case of when you're switching stances, I feel like if you want to switch stance, you have to really be out of punching range of your opponent. I mean, you could even get away with it in kicking range, just because the switch, unless someone's going to be timing you super hard, super well, like the switch to the opposite stance, it's going to be harder for them to just get a kick up there than a punch. A punch is just, you can just throw it out and see what happens, unless you're a fast kicker like a Edson Barbosa or something. But other than that, like, to switch stance, you really want to be at kicking or all the way out of striking range. And Taleb kind of, because he switched that stance within the striking range, within boxing range, it kind of opened up the opportunity for Salikov, and it was a good read by Salikov to notice that he was still in range when he was switching the stances. So all in all, some pretty entertaining, some pretty high level fights. I missed a couple of fights, so I wasn't able to cover those. But from what I saw, it's pretty entertaining card. Not the most exciting card of all time, but definitely some takeaways. Definitely some things that, when I was watching, I would want to implement in my own coaching and just my own analysis game, and seeing those different tips and tricks that people are using during the fights yesterday actually. But yeah, so if you guys enjoyed the commentary here, you can leave me a like, subscribe, you can hit that notification bell. I will be dropping more videos and podcasts in the future, and until next time, I'm signing out.